I am so excited to introduce my next guest to the Crowdsource the Truth audience. Lin DeVecchio is a former special agent with the FBI who was involved in the Mafia Wars. He was in charge of undercover informants. Mr. DeVecchio, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Jason.
You're looking well. You've been put through the ringer by some FBI people, some of which I've become acquainted with, unfortunately. I think a lot of people might not have heard your story. Can you give us just a brief background so people can understand what it is that you've been through?
I'm just trying to find the best place to start. When I was a supervisor, we had Bonanno and Colombo squads. Everything went well until early 1990s, and the problem became a problem with one of my agents that worked for me. I had been accused of giving information to one of my confidential sources. Now, I had over the course of my career, I had developed 6 top echelon sources, meaning they were members of organized crime. I had 4 of the 5 organized crime families. I had at least one source in each family, and in the Colombo family, I had 3 verified member sources who would provide incredible information that could not be obtained any other way except coming from someone who was actually involved in criminal matters. And some people will say, and I can report on this later, well, how can you be talking to members of organized crime who are killers and criminals and not put them away? We could discuss that ad nauseum, but there is no other way to get some information unless you want to go, if you think that your local priest, rabbi, the local butcher, any one of those people can give you the information, then you're living in La La Land. The only way you get the information is from actual members of organized crime. In this case, every police agency uses informants. Nothing changes. To get into the problem I had briefly is I had an agent working for me by the name of Favo, who thought I had been giving information to one of my prime informants. And the informant was Gregory Scarpa. He was a member of the Colombo organized crime family. And I had dealt with Greg for 12 years and considered him, much to people's dismay that think differently, he was a friend. I liked Greg. He liked me. We got along very well. He was involved in a lot of criminal activities. I knew that. And I told him, if you ever get caught or my people find you're doing something that they can prove, that's it. You're going away. This is not one of those deals where you tell me your secrets and I'll cover you no matter what. It doesn't work that way. We don't condone any criminal activity, especially in the organized crime field. So he knew the caveat when we worked together. And based on that, for 12 years, he supplied incredible information, which led ultimately to many, many convictions and to the ultimate case, which was the commission case, where we indicted the top echelon brass of all 5 families and actually got convictions on, I forget the actual number, 11 or 12 of the top people. Now, there came a time when this agent thought that I was giving information to Scarpa. And he actually went to my superiors and said, we think DeVecchio is giving information that he shouldn't be doing to this Gregory Scarpa. That caused no end of problems for me, obviously. For about 2 years, I was under investigation by the Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR, and they spent 2 years looking under everything you can think of, including my fingernails, to see if I was actually giving information to an organized crime member. And they concluded, and rightfully so, that the allegations were absolutely baseless, which I had told them from the get-go. And I said, when I first heard about this, I said, why don't you go talk to my informant and ask him directly if I'm giving him any information. And I had no fear of him saying, oh yeah, DeVecchio was giving me information. And it never occurred to me he would do that. And in fact, there came a point in time later on where he was actually put in a position to say those very words, which would have saved him from dying in prison as opposed to dying at home. Time for to do that story later on if you want to get into it. So that caused a big rift between myself and people in the Eastern District of New York and the organized crime section. Namely, Valerie Caproni was when she was in charge of the strike force and did not like me because she thought, thanks to this agent, that I was giving information to organized crime, which was undermining their cases.
Let me just pause you there for a second, because I happen to personally have interacted with Valerie Caproni, and in my estimation, she is a fundamentally dishonest person who continually breaks the law, lies. She's been accused by Congress of violating the Fourth Amendment and was kicked out of the FBI. She was the FBI General Counsel from 2003 to 2011, and she was the Assistant U.S. Attorney in charge of the Eastern District of New York Organized Crime Division for many, many years, until I believe around 1998.
Yeah, I was out of the bureau at that time, but I think that's about right. Yes.
Please carry on.
It progressed from there. As I said, I spent 2 years being investigated, and they found absolutely nothing. And believe me, if the FBI is investigating one of their own for alleged bribery, or rather not bribery, but for passing information and probably getting paid for it, there is no better organization than the FBI to investigate their own. And they went to whatever lengths they had to do, and ultimately found me blameless. No harm, no foul. There was nothing to it, which obviously relieved my mind. Then in 1990. Excuse me for the dates. There's too many. It's go back too many years.
Ago, yeah.
I'm getting too old to start remembering all these things. I retired in 1996. After I had been declared blameless, interestingly enough, they said, "Gee, we found you innocent and everything, but we would like you to take a polygraph just to make sure." And I told them in fairly colorful language, which I got used to speaking when I worked in New York for so many years. Something that was anatomically impossible for some man to do. But anyway, I told them that there's no way that I'm going to do that. I don't have to prove my innocence. You spent 2 years looking into it. Why do I have to tell you that I'm innocent when I am? But you want a polygraph. And based on that, I said, "That's it. I'm done." And I retired. Before I had my time in, I had the papers signed. I was ready to go, and I retired. All right, that was in 1996. Now, come 2007, I get a call from my attorney and friend by the name of Doug Grover, and said, "It looks like you're getting ready to be indicted, Lin." I said, "What? WTF? I don't understand. What do you mean indicted for what?" He said, "Well, they're talking about indicting you for 4 murders." And I actually was in disbelief. I couldn't imagine what they were talking about. And sure enough, the Brooklyn district attorney at the time had presented a case to the grand jury to indict me on 4 murders. How did this come about? Gregory Scarpa, my informant, one of the best ones I had, a Colombo family, had died in 1994. Now we're talking 2007. And his paramour, or live-in. He used to call Linda his wife, but he was still married. But Linda lived with him for many, many years, and they had a son together. Had been talking to some a Brooklyn detective that had been working with the DA's office. I'm jumping ahead of myself. The DA had under investigation 2 NYPD police officers for informing or were actually taking bribes or giving information to members of the Lucchese family. Now, the Lucchese family had close ties with the Colombo family. And the Brooklyn DA and one of his underlings were writing a book on a current case that they were investigating, which is a violation of legal canons. Now, the Department of Justice came in and said, you can't be doing that. We're letting the FBI take over the investigation of this case, which enraged the district attorney. He was about to lose one of his prized cases. So it's our belief, certainly mine, my compatriots, my attorneys, that in retaliation, he decided to take it out on me. I just have to be a convenient whipping boy. How did that come about? One of his detectives had been talking to this Linda Shiro, who was the paramour of Gregory Scarpa, my informant, or was my informant, who had died, obviously, many years before. And she said, I was involved in the murders of 4 individuals, whom she named. Based on that information, I was indicted for the murder of 4 people. What happens next? I fly up to Brooklyn, report in, they take me in, I'm booked, I'm in handcuffs. And it was interesting, in my book, I note that, and I didn't name them because I didn't want to get them in trouble at the time, but the police officer that took me in knew me, and they apologized, said, Lin, we're sorry, we're just doing what we're told. And I understand that. If you're told to take me and put me in handcuffs and lock me up, you do it. And they were not happy, and they apologized to me. And for that, I'll always be grateful to those men that did that. They locked me up overnight, chained to a bed chair. There's a wooden steel chair by what appeared to be a cot, and I was handcuffed to that the entire evening, the entire night, all through the night. I spent a night there.
It's torture.
Not that I was going to run out. I was in a locked room, handcuffed. I don't know what they were expecting I was going to do. Flee the country, maybe. And at any rate, I was indicted for the 4 murders, and I'm certainly cutting this story short. The case goes to trial. The first week and a half, almost close to 2 weeks, nothing was said that put me into the murder of 4 people. And the prime witness was this Linda Shiro. And she said, she perjured herself on the stand, basically. And the attorneys I had took her apart very well. There came a time when, after about 2 weeks, when 2 New York reporters, Jerry Robbins and Jerry Capisi, is it Jerry Robinson? I probably calling him wrong. It was Robbins and Jerry Capisi. Jerry Capisi, I knew very well, is probably still writing for one of the newspapers in New York on organized crime and criminal matters. They came in with a tape that they had made with Linda Shiro several years before. What was on the tape? They were writing a book about the life of Gregory Scarpa. And they talked to her specifically about the murders that I was supposedly had committed. And she said, no, Lin DeVecchio wasn't involved in that at all. Well, they introduced the tapes into the court, and the judge, within hours, dismissed the case because she had clearly perjured herself, and the prosecution had no choice. They realized that wasn't a winning argument, that their prime witness and only witness had been discredited and proven to be a liar. I'm sure they weren't happy about that. What was bad is they had been given vast amounts of exculpatory information before I was indicted that would have cleared me anyway, and they chose to ignore that and go ahead with the indictment, hoping, I guess, to make a name for themselves. The prosecutor, I know Vecchione was the prosecutor. You're kind of a rotund pain in the backside. I'm having to watch a lot of times.
You can say whatever you want.
My New York comes out a lot.
Hey, you can say whatever you want, Mr. DeVecchio. This is a torturous situation they put you through. And let me just interject for a moment. So you're describing something to us that at the time, if you told somebody this, that you went into court and that the FBI presented witnesses that were lying and did stuff because they didn't like you or whatever, most people on the surface would probably find it ridiculous. But we've now seen this play out where really similar things have been done to someone who is one of the most famous celebrities in the world. He's been the president. He's running for president. This notion that things can just be made up and strategically injected into court, particularly by prosecutors, by FBI general counsels, by federal judges, they know how this system works. They can suppress evidence that you might bring forward. There really is no justice in that type of scenario, right?
Well, the famous saying goes, I forget what New York judge said, is you can indict a ham sandwich. So, prosecutors can really indict anybody they want to if they put their mind to it and just bring out enough facts them to sway a grand jury, which is very easy. So yes, if you would tell somebody that would happen, it would be hard to believe. I couldn't believe it myself. In fact, one of the women I was supposed to have caused the murder of, Mary Berry, when my attorney said, well, you were accused of, she was murdered because of you. And I said, who's Mary Berry? I didn't even know who it was. I knew who the other guys were, had nothing to do with them. They were members of organized crime. But yeah, I was astounded. It just someone's out of the blue, many years after retiring, suddenly, oh, you're being indicted for 4 murders. And I think I'm probably the only FBI agent ever to be indicted for 4 murders. And the whole thing was built on on a house of cards. There was absolutely no substance to it, which, gee, what a surprise. We could have told them that before that, and they had plenty of exculpatory information. But the DA, Hines, refused to. He didn't want to hear that. This is his feather in his cap. Oh, we have an FBI agent we're accused of committing murders and taking bribes and doing all kinds of nefarious things. So this is a juicy case. Well, luckily for me, that tape was there. The 2 reporters knew me and knew that the thing was way off base, and they actually broke one of their code rules of reporters. You don't ever tell who your sources are. In this case, they chose to do that, and it certainly saved me. Now, would I have been convicted? I don't think so, because my attorney had made shambles of their star witness, and we had more than enough information to present to the court to show that was all built on a house of cards. It was all nonsense, and I wasn't. I truly. Surprisingly enough, I was not worried, even though my wife and I joked about it sometimes. I said, well, you can come visit me, in attic. We'll get a room close. You can get a room close by, a little gallows humor. But I had faith in the system in this case, and knowing that I certainly had not done it. So it was, it certainly made for an interesting aftermath to my career. We'll say that.
Now, one of the things you said earlier was that you felt that Valerie Caproni just didn't like you. It seems there must be something more, because this is just such an incredible effort to go to for someone who just doesn't like you. There's another interesting aspect to Gregory Scarpa. Now, it might be confusing for people, including me. There's Gregory Scarpa Sr., and Gregory Scarpa Jr., and both of these individuals were FBI human informants at some point, right?
I don't know about Junior. He may have talked to him after I got out. He wasn't an informant when I was on active duty.
Aha.
And that may well be true. You probably know better than I do in that case.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so I'm glad we're talking about this because there's a whole story, there's a whole part of this that has to do with Gregory Scarpa Jr. allegedly befriending Ramzi Youssef in jail. Now, for people who don't know or don't remember, Ramzi Youssef is the guy who was accused of driving a van filled with explosives. The FBI loves these vans filled with explosives, but this guy allegedly rented a van, filled it with explosives, drove it into the World Trade Center in 1993 to try to blow it up. And he was hanging out with the blind sheikh in Jersey City or something like that.
Prison.
Right. And then this was kind of the precursor to 9/11. This guy was apparently the mastermind of this Bojinka plot. But it's all going on right around the time that, Valerie Caproni is really rising to prominence. And part of the story includes this radical jihadi Ramzi Youssef befriending Scarpa Jr. and passing messages to him while they're both in solitary confinement. There's something about this story that just sounds absolutely ridiculous to me. I find it difficult to imagine. You just said something that I think people would find odd. But, we've had The Sopranos and The Godfather and all that, and this notion that there's some sort of likable aspect to these horrible killers is something maybe people can wrap their brains around, but I find it difficult to imagine. There is a code, the Omerta, among the Cosa Nostra, where there's a certain honor among the thieves. Do you believe that it would be likely that a mafia kind of kingpin style guy would become friends with a jihadi in jail? Seems weird, doesn't it?
No, that's very, very, very weird. I would not expect to see that, or even if you told me that was the case, it would be hard to believe, knowing what I do about how they were when I worked them. I don't think it's changed much. I've been out 26 years now. So,
but this was only in 1993, 1998 timeframe, right around the time you were still there. And also, this was a different environment. We didn't have all this DEI and everybody having to like things and everything. People were pretty, and I mean, characters like, what's his name? Carol O'Connor from All in the Family, Archie Bunker. That's a little bit more the style of some of these old school mafia guys. They're not really into befriending radical jihadis. I found that to be very implausible. And I think there's something here because Valerie Caproni, remind us when you retired?
I retired in 1996.
Was it before TWA 800 or after TWA 800?
It was before. I mean, I'm sorry. It was after. No, I'm sorry.
So it was Kallstrom. Kallstrom was the head of the FBI?
Yes.
What was your impression of him?
Oh, one of the best agents I've ever seen. Very competent, very, very terrific guy. He should have been the director of the FBI when they were looking for somebody to take charge. He would have been a good one. No, he was extremely competent agent, very well liked. Very affable guy. I hated to see him. He died a few years back. It was a loss, but no, he was in charge of that investigation and did a hell of a job. He really
what was
did.
Your impression of this TWA 800 disaster and the subsequent investigation?
To the best of my knowledge, and I have no reason not to believe it, that it was caused by a spark in a gas tank that blew up the plane. And knowing Kallstrom and his team, there was little left to be found out that they couldn't find out. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. I'm not sure. And I've talked to people who said, "Oh no, we saw a rocket or something go up and hit the plane." I don't buy it, and I think it was one of those tragic accidents that happened through no one's fault. It just is one of those things that happens. I don't believe that there was some conspiracy involved in that.
It's
if there
interesting
was.
to hear you say that you're not a conspiracy theorist. Obviously, the mafia and all the things that you were investigating, all those guys were in massive RICO conspiracies. So obviously, conspiracies are going on all the time, aren't they?
Oh, they are, no question about it. In this particular case, I don't believe that there was involvement in outside forces taking that plane down.
Mm-hmm.
World Trade Center, yes. Both times there are conspiracies, absolutely. And you're right, conspiracies go on ad nauseum. But on that particular one, I'm not convinced that there was some sinister motive behind it.
Sure. And you didn't investigate that.
Proved.
You didn't investigate that, so you have no other knowledge beyond what everybody saw on the news. Let me take you back to the Eastern District U.S. Attorney's Office. Did you interact with Andrew Weissman at all? He was in there when all this was going on.
Yeah, briefly. I had I had enough contact with him, but I tried to avoid him.
Let it go. Tell us.
It wasn't one of my favorites. Let's just say.
Say it. Call it like it is. This guy is an absolute scumbag, liar, and criminal who should himself be in jail. Well, my opinion. I'm not trying to get you to say anything.
No, I certainly have very strong opinions on him. You know, punch in the mouth might have been fun, but
he's still around. I know where he works. Not that anybody should do anything. No one should do anything to Andrew Weissman. He's innocent until proven guilty.
You're right. No, he was. He was just. I personally didn't like the man. I just didn't like his attitude, the way he conducted himself. It was one of those things. I just took a dislike to him. So I'm not going to. I'm not going to sugarcoat it anyway and say, "Oh yeah, he was okay. I could work." No, I didn't like the man. Period. I thought he was. I thought he would win at any. It didn't matter what he did as long as he won. So.
Yes, he's very unethical. Putting all insults aside, I find him to be an extremely unethical individual who will do almost anything to win. Now, of course, he was Robert Mueller's lead prosecutor in the Donald Trump investigation. And when Valerie Caproni left her position as the head of the Organized Crime Division in the Eastern District of New York U.S. Attorney's Office, her self-described apprentice, Andrew Weissman, took over her role. Now, I guess I have this document elsewhere, but it's difficult to find now. This used to be easier to get to. The thing is, in 1998, is this it? Let's see. No, that's not the one. This guy's signed so many cooperation agreements, it's unbelievable. But there was an individual named Felix Sater who signed a cooperation agreement with Weissman. Are you familiar with Felix Sater at all? Did he come up?
No, I'm not. I'm not familiar with the name.
Yeah, he might have been a little later than what you were doing. You were focused mostly on Cosa Nostra, Italian mafia, and the wars between those crews. It's pretty widely known, however, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, that after Perestroika, when the Soviet Union dissolved and the Iron Curtain fell and lots of Russians immigrated to the United States, there was a huge problem with Russian organized crime, particularly in the Eastern District, and there was a real lack of Russian-speaking agents. Is that something that ever came into your sphere?
No, it didn't. Not at all.
I think this was the next generation of stuff after you left. But the interesting thing is Felix Sater signed this cooperation agreement with Andrew Weissman. I know how we can find it. The Intercept had they had a FOIA that revealed Felix Sater's cooperation agreement. And Felix Sater, he came into the news recently because he was working in Trump Tower, and he was the Russian real estate developer behind the Trump Tower Moscow deal. What we learned at Michael Cohen's trial just last year is that Sater was sending emails to Michael Cohen in around 2015-16 timeframe, basically saying, hey, we need to get Donald Trump to Moscow to try to do this deal with the hotel. And he's setting up media events and things like that, which makes sense on the surface. We've got a celebrity real estate developer. We want to have him in Moscow to meet the investors and get on TV and all that. But isn't it also true, Mr. DeVecchio, that the FBI likes to do things that have plausible deniability? So it seems like something is happening when actually something sinister is happening under the surface. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure.
I think that Felix Sater set this up
It
in such
certainly
a
didn't
way.
happen. If it happened to my, let me put it this way: if it happened to my watch, I didn't know about it.
No, not on your watch at all. I'm not implying that. I'm just saying, you know, some
No.
of these people like Andrew Weissman, and I agree with your assessment of him. And he's just signing all kinds of deals. Felix Sater is another one of these guys. And it makes sense. It's a complicated issue that I think I hope we'll have an opportunity to discuss in the future, because it's hard to understand how the FBI or any law enforcement agency decides who is a criminal that they can do business with and allow to continue doing crimes to catch other criminals. At what point is the FBI complicit in the crimes themselves? Not that you are. I'm not implying that at all. I want you to understand, I am on your side, and I think that you got screwed by Valerie Caproni, Andrew Weissman, and all of these people. And I suspect there's a component to your story that even you have not yet discovered. And I'm hopeful that by examining the stories around Gregory Scarpa Jr., Ramzi Youssef, Felix Sater, and TWA 800, we might learn something about your case, particularly about Valerie Caproni. To be completely upfront with you, I have also been a victim of Valerie Caproni, not to the extent that you have, but I find her to be an incredibly dishonest person who absolutely is unfit to be a U.S. District Court judge, and I've dedicated the rest of my life to getting her impeached. And I hope the conversations that we have can help me in that.
Well, you get no argument from me on that one.
There we go. I've found an ally. I love that.
Yeah, she was not my favorite. We certainly didn't like each other, and I think to this day she probably thinks that I was giving information to to organized crime. I think. I want to say there was a case, Secret Service case, and I'm not sure if Valerie Caproni was the prosecutor of that case, but I was accused of tipping off Scarpa's son, Greg Jr., of fleeing, of going into the wind when the Secret Service was looking. I'm sure it was a Secret Service case.
And I've read that. That's what confused me about your involvement with Gregory Scarpa Jr., because in my research of Valerie Caproni, I saw that allegation that you had done something with Scarpa Jr., but then in reading your book and reading more about you, it was all about Scarpa Sr. And again, it goes back to this confusion that the FBI likes to inject. Even Scarpa Jr., Scarpa Sr., it's kind of like identity duplexing, right? It's hard to tell which guy we're talking about. It conflates a lot of things, doesn't it?
That may be. I mean, the only Scarpa that I talk about is Greg Sr. The only problem, the only really tangential connection I had with Jr. was I was accused of giving Scarpa a heads up that he was being sought, and I was concealing the information that I probably knew where he was, and which in fact was complete bullshit. In fact, they were looking for his son. I went to Greg one day when I was talking to him. I says, Greg, I said, listen, where is your son? I said, they're looking for him. I said, it'd be better if he just turns himself in rather than creating a problem. And he says, Lin, he says, I truly don't know where he went. I know he's absconded somewhere, but I don't know where. Was Greg lying to me? Maybe. But he did not give his son up. And the relationship I had with Scarpa at the time, I believed that. Call me naive, fine. But I believe what he said. I mean, I knew him that well. After 10 years or 12 years, you get to know somebody very, very well. And I think in the back of her mind, Caproni always thought, regardless of what I said, that I had tipped the father off, Gregory Sr., that they're looking for your son, so tell him to go hide.
But wait a minute. Is it that she thought that, or that was a component of a larger plan that she needed to make stick in order for her bullshit story to make sense?
Yeah, anything's possible in this.
I think it's the latter. So here's the Felix Sater agreement. So this is an agreement signed in 1998. This is a cooperation agreement here. We can see 1998 CR 1101. That's a criminal indictment, right? Mm-hmm. And we can see at the bottom of this, we've got Felix Sater's signature as the defendant. And here is Andrew Weissman, supervising U.S. Attorney. Now, this is signed December 10th, 1998. Weissman has only been the head of the Organized Crime Division for 2 or 3 months. Valerie Caproni had left in September of 1998 to go and join the SEC, where she helped beef up the enforcement at the SEC and to make kind of a stronger link between the SEC and the FBI. Valerie Caproni was very interested in strengthening things like the FBI JTTF, FBI interaction with NYPD and other local law enforcement agencies. What do you think about all that? The FBI JTTF? It's unconstitutional, isn't it?
No, I think that worked out well. Actually, I think it's good that they work together on that. The NYPD has some very competent people, and at least they had certainly when I was in there, and I think they still do. And I always thought that was a good. I have no problem with the JTTF working between the FBI and local police. I really don't.
Let me modify the question. Because I agree with you that it's the type of thing that on its face seems sensible. And certainly when you were coming up and doing all of your work in New York is a unique place. It's a nexus of money and travel and immigration, and it's, one of the most important cities in the world. So there are certain unique law enforcement challenges here that don't exist elsewhere. But since the JTTF began in New York City, between 4 NYPD detectives and 4 FBI special agents, it has now expanded dramatically to where it has penetrated so many local law enforcement agencies. It's difficult to understand exactly what the FBI intends to do with it. This is an article here from 2011, and there we see our friend, Valerie Caproni. She was the U.S. attorney. She was the FBI general counsel by this time. The U.S. attorney for Oregon is Dwight Holton right here, but they were begging with the Portland, Oregon City Council to rejoin the JTTF because the local police had determined that the FBI wanted to essentially control their department and get them to do certain unconstitutional things like spy on people on the basis of religious beliefs or political beliefs. And certainly now, when we hear about the FBI spying on Catholic churches and PTA meetings and things, this is not the FBI that you were involved in, Mr. DeVecchio, is it?
Not the FBI that I joined and served in. No, it's not.
What do you think about the FBI today?
I'm disappointed at the top echelons. The day-to-day working agent, the brick agents out there are still very competent, very good. From the reports that I get from people that I've talked to, and I believe that it's the hierarchy that has somehow been compromised. Why or how, I don't know. I'm not impressed with anybody in the top echelons. I think they've caused a lot of problems for the FBI. Are certainly what we enjoyed as FBI agents is not there anymore. I mean, it was we relied on our integrity and our talent to do what we're assigned to do, which is investigate or just not organized crime in many different criminal venues, and we did a good job of that. And I just think it's been in the last several years, it's been compromised, and some of the actions of some of the agents that have recently been fired as a result is very dismaying to me. And I'm not impressed at all by the leadership. And most of us of my vintage feel the same way. They've changed the culture of the FBI. It was at one time it was an extremely well-respected agency, and I was proud to be in it. And I'm still proud that I was an FBI agent. Don't get me wrong. And the rank and file of the FBI are still very, very competent, and I can associate with them. But it's dismaying to us that the hierarchy somewhere down the line has been compromised, and I don't know what's caused that. Is it DEI? Have they found people that are easily swayed or easily told what to do. The independence of the FBI seems to have vanished, and part of that, frankly, is I think it started when Mueller was the
Now we're talking.
FBI head, and he, previous to his leadership, most of the jobs in the FBI, almost all of them, were filled by agents. People had come up through the ranks. When Mueller came in, he brought in a lot of people from the Department of Justice that didn't know our, if you will, our culture of the FBI, how to investigate cases. I mean, to this day, I dealt with attorneys most of my career, and a lot of them didn't know a damn thing about how to investigate a case. I mean, we brought the stuff to them, and they were very good prosecutors, but how we worked, how we handled things, they really didn't know. He destroyed a lot of that by bringing in a lot of Department of Justice attorneys to handle cases that were previously done, or I'm sorry, to put in positions that were previously made by FBI agents who had come up through the ranks and knew how we operated. And I think, and slowly but surely, the Department of Justice had infiltrated the FBI to the point where I think they call a lot of the shots, which before they didn't do. Now, granted, we used to have many things we did. We needed Department of Justice authorization to do these things. No, granted, but I think it broke our ability to be independent and to make independent judgments without somebody questioning it or from orders coming down from higher up. In my career, I never ever was told, well, you can't do this, or you have to be careful about doing this because so and so said, or we've been told not to do this. That never happened in anything that I ever investigated, or even when I was a supervisor. I was never told, you can't do that. Why can't I do that? I was never told that. Well, it's because someone higher up didn't want it. No, that never happened when I was there. Has that changed? Yes. It's just like informants. A good example is that when we developed informants, we never disclosed, not even to our fellow agents, who our informants were. When I worked, had my 6 organized crime informants, member sources, 1 or 2 agents, my supervisor would know who they are. Maybe whatever partner I had at the time would know who I was working with, but we wouldn't even tell our own agents. Now, and especially we wouldn't tell federal prosecutors. Now it's my understanding, and I've heard this secondhand, that now they have to let the prosecutors know who the informants are. Well, to me, that's ridiculous. And the reason for that, one of the reasons for not doing that, is because the prosecutor can be a prosecutor one day, and next day he's on the other side. He's a defense attorney. Right. Oh, suddenly he knows who our informants are. I think that's absolutely ridiculous.
Puts your life at risk, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's changed. I mean, the Department of Justice obviously has had their way with that. I think that's absolutely, in my opinion, and I could bring in probably 1,000 agents who would back me up. That's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard of. But that's just an example of how the FBI has changed, and I blame that starting with Mueller and then right on through up until today's director.
Oh yeah, Christopher Wray. Well, we got to talk about Louis Freeh as well. There's so much that we can talk about. I hope that you and I will be able to do a series of interviews, because we're just beginning to touch on this. But so many agents from your era at the FBI who I've spoken to over the years absolutely share your sentiment. I forget the gentleman's name, but one of the best ways I've heard it phrased is that the FBI was transformed from sort of a national law enforcement agency into a national intelligence agency, which was really never what it was intended to be. And also along the lines of what you were just telling us, pretty recently we had this Charles McGonigal, who was supposed to be investigating the whole concept of, Donald Trump doing whatever with Russia. He himself has now been indicted for receiving $225,000 from the people he was investigating. It's pretty insane. This guy, did you know about this?
No. But you're right about a lot changed after 9/11 too. I think we were pushed into becoming more active in spy stuff, if you will, international, terrorism and that thing. Now, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. I think they pulled a lot of agents off other cases and off, and devote more agent time to those things, which is really not what we were set up for. Basically, we were a law enforcement agency, looking into criminal activities, of which there are literally hundreds that were assigned to the FBI to investigate. Now we've become more of an not more, but a large part has become intelligence gathering, which is nothing wrong with that, but there's ways to do that. To me, that's what CIA should be doing, and they are.
Exactly. And not domestically. The problem I see, Mr. DeVecchio, is that Valerie Caproni, all the things that you're talking about, 9/11, Robert Mueller, Valerie Caproni has her fat ass right in the middle of all of this stuff, and she is a gigantic problem. So let me just take you back. I'm sorry for my ADD approach, but this is the way my nonlinear thinking works. And we've had a lot of problems here in New York lately. I know you no longer live here, but you've probably heard that basically anybody who knows Eric Adams is coming under federal investigation. The New York City Police Commissioner, Ed Caban, is accused of shaking people down with his twin brother. He stepped down. Then they assigned this guy, Tom Donlin. Did you ever work with Donlin?
No, I didn't.
But he was in the FBI in the 70s and 80s, wasn't he?
As far as I know, he was, yes. And I didn't, I don't remember if I had met him, if I knew him. Sadly, I don't remember. And I knew a lot of the agents. I mean, we always had about 1,000 agents in New York, and I knew a large number of them. The only ones I really didn't get to know were the ones that worked security intelligence gathering operations, the spy craft, the spy side of the house. I had very little contact with them. I was strictly
This is 40 years ago. It's a long time ago. It's difficult to remember even if you did meet him, but this guy's home has been searched. He's telling everybody this is not a police matter and he's not under investigation, but they raided his home, took his phones and his computers, but everything is fine. Don't worry about that. This guy was also the head of DHS, which of course is a concoction of 9/11 and a grotesque thing that is an unconstitutional overreach. Something that a lot of people don't know that I learned from watching Sal Greco's great podcast and NYPD's Finest Unfiltered is that this reprehensible dope, Tom Donlin, wrote a letter on behalf of McGonigal, submitted here. He's writing on behalf of Charlie McGonigal in regards to his upcoming sentencing. I've known Charlie for over 25 years, first meeting him while we were employed as special agents of the FBI in the New York field office, and throughout the years he developed both a professional and personal relationship with Charlie. He's writing for leniency for this guy who's getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from Oleg Deripaska and all kinds of stuff like that. He's the National Threat Center section chief or something, and he thinks it's totally fine. We should write nice letters about FBI agents who are supposed to be investigating the Russians, but instead are getting paid by them. Is this unbelievable or what?
I know. I'm with you. I'd love to know what prompted the investigations and what's behind it. Sadly, I'm not too far out of the loop, Jason. But it would be interesting. It would be just as interesting to me as it would be to you to find out, what's going on there, to see what the actual story is.
Yeah, and Mr. DeVecchio, my hope is that through a series of conversations, your general knowledge of the operation of the FBI and historical knowledge of some of these people that we're talking about, combined with my knowledge of some of the events that happened after you left and my unique insights into how the minds of these criminal scumbags, Andrew Weissman, Valerie Caproni, allegedly criminals, according to Congress, how their minds work. And it just takes me back briefly to this guy, Felix Sater. So what we learned about this cooperation agreement that he signed with Andrew Weissman, according to him, I don't know if this is true. This is what he told Congress under oath. He told the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence that over 25 years he was involved. This guy's like the Russian James Bond. He was involved in obtaining Osama bin Laden's satellite phone number, according to him, that was used to target Al-Qaeda sites in Afghanistan in 1998 when Bill Clinton was president. Separately, he was put in charge by a special presidential directive to retrieve particular at-risk missiles that had been given to here. One of Sater's early operations involved the pursuit in 1998 of Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. The CIA had originally given the missiles to the Mujahideen to oust Soviets during the occupation in Afghanistan. And the funny thing is, there's a lot of pieces of Felix Sater's story that don't exactly hang together. I had the opportunity to speak with him just a few months ago in Thomas Paine Park, and I asked him if one of these at-risk missiles was used to shoot down TWA 800. He said, of course. Now, we don't know if Felix Sater knows or not, but I have a feeling if I shared the evidence that I'm aware of with TWA 800, if I shared that with you, your opinion of what happened might change. And I have a feeling that Valerie Caproni and Robert Mueller and some of these sinister people who I believe were behind your prosecution had something to do with this. I can't prove that yet. These are my, allegations and opinions based on information and belief just formed by looking at this evidence here in the public domain. But it's a really strange mystery. I appreciate you spending this much time with me here, Mr. DeVecchio. I want to be sensitive to your time, and we have many more interviews we could have. Anything else you want to cover here in our first conversation before we wrap it up for today?
Oh, well, we could talk. We could go on for hours and talk about things. I think we've covered the topic at least reasonably.
It's a good introduction.
Reasonably well for a start. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you. I really appreciate your willingness to talk to me. You've had an incredible life, an incredible persecution at the hands of the agency that you sacrificed your time, risked your safety. I mean, going undercover with the mob and you could have easily been killed by any of these guys at any moment. It had to be a high pressure job.
It's interesting that I never, I guess when you're young, you're invincible. You don't think about the dangers. The only time, I'll give you one quick story if you have time. The only time the only time I ever had a little bit of apprehension is one of the informants I developed in one of the families was on probation. And I found that out, and I found that his probation officer was in New Jersey. And so I went to my boss, and then we had to go to the bureau, and then to the department of the probation department, federal, and say, listen, I want to talk to this guy. Can I have permission to do that? And they okayed it. They said, knock yourself out. So I went to the probation office where he was going to be interviewed for his routine interview. And I talked to the guy. I said, listen, I want to talk to this man for a few minutes, if you don't mind. No problem. It's been cleared. Probation officer leaves. I walk in, tell him who I am. And I tell him, basically I could use his help and I'd like to talk to him. And he got enraged. He says, what the hell are you doing here? Who the F do you think you are? I don't want to talk to you. He says, if you're not leaving, I'm leaving. I thought, oh, that went well. And I gave him a number to call. I said, if you ever want to talk to me, or anything you want to tell me, or maybe you can help me out, I said, here's a number, please do so. About 2 weeks later, he called. He says, you know who this is? I said, yeah, I know who this is. He says, are you familiar with a street in New Jersey in Teaneck? So he gave me the coordinates, the streets, 2 streets. I said, I know exactly where it is. I don't live too far away from there. He said, meet me on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock. Okay. Now, I didn't tell anybody. I was not married at the time. I did not tell anybody where I was going. I took it upon myself. About 9:30, I left my house. and went to the address we had discussed. And I went there about 10 minutes early. I wanted to look around and make sure there was no problems. And it's a heavily Jewish area, so there were a lot of Jewish people about. And I figured, okay, there's no mafia in this area, that's for sure. I'm standing in the corner and a black limo rolls up, and this could have been right out of Hollywood's Central Casting.
Yeah.
You know, when a black limo and the rear window comes down halfway, and he says, "Get in." Now I'm thinking to myself, nobody knows I'm here. Is this could be my last? You know, I mean, I was armed, but you know, could I've gotten to the gun fast enough? I don't know. So he could see my dilemma, and he says, "My attorney's sitting next to me, and the driver doesn't know anything about it." I'm thinking, oh boy. So sure enough, I get in the front seat. I'm thinking, you know, that's where they always shoot somebody. They're in the passenger seat.
Ice pick.
And yeah, and actually it went well. He subsequently became one of my informants. But
Wow.
that's the only time in my career where I had that twinge of maybe this is not the right thing to do. Do I really want to get into this car with this guy? And I mean, it's right. You know, it was Hollywood script. You know, in retrospect, I laugh and say, "Oh, brother, what a, you know."
What a thing. It's an amazing life. Amazing life, Mr. DeVecchio. People should definitely purchase the book. We're going to win this thing. It's the shocking frame-up of a mafia crime buster. This is the true story of Lin DeVecchio and his persecution at the hands of the agency that he risked his life for. I cannot thank you enough for joining me today, Mr. DeVecchio, and I definitely look forward to future conversations. I know that everybody has really enjoyed this, and I want to remind people they can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, or subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I want to thank all the people who are sponsoring the show. We wouldn't have the opportunity to speak to living legends like Lin DeVecchio without your support and sponsorship. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, sir.